Everywhere you look, it seems to me that somebody is making a video about the council tax and whether it's a fair system or an unfair system, whether it's legal or unlawful. And I know I've made several of these, and you may be coming back going, oh, Vobes, what are you doing? You're doing another one. Well, I am. One of my, many of my wonderful viewers have been in touch about this and pointed out various things, but somebody has sent me a particular number of points, which is a series of logic about this council tax thing. And of course, and I want to go through that with you. And of course, this is a time in January, as I record this, 2024, when a lot of people will be perhaps making the last payment of the previous year's council tax. They get a couple of months respite, and then we do the merry dance all over again from the 1st of April. But many people will be thinking, hang on a minute, we've been watching some of these things, and people have been saying it's illegal, it's unenforceable, it's unlawful, or it's unfair. And really, I'm not saying that people should not pay their council tax. I'm asking, is it a fair system? And if it isn't a fair system, what's wrong with it? If it's not a fair system, I am sort of saying, well, perhaps we should have a better system. And we've looked at various different ways in which the council tax is being collected and then enforced. But is it right? Is the council tax, the money that's being collected, immediately going to the council for all the council duties that it needs to pay for, such as the roads and not the roads, I think that comes out of the road tax and the fuel tax, but the bins and the lights and the police and all these other things that we're told that a certain percentage of it is? Or is it going to this consolidate fund, which is straight to central office at the government's headquarters, a corporation, by the way? All of this is a corporation because we're in corporate Britain. Nobody seems to rebut that, I notice. People do take my videos and they go through and say, oh no, he's wrong here and he's wrong there and he's wrong about this. But they don't turn around and say I'm wrong about the corporate Britain. They don't turn around and say that councils don't have Brad and Dun and Bradstreet numbers. They don't tell me that the office of the Prime Minister is a corporation and not an assembly of people working for our benefit, and that they have Dun and Bradstreet numbers, or indeed that the whole government is a corporation, just as McDonald's or a Kentucky Fried Chicken or any of these other outlets of fast food is a corporation. So they don't tell us that. Anyway, so I'm not saying everybody should have everything for nothing. I'm not saying that at all. But a fair system in which you're contributing to your community fairly, that you have a choice. And if there is a contract or an invoice or something like that, we need to negotiate these things. So anyway, let's have a look at this, because this is quite fascinating. And I think it's all been highlighted recently because of that case with Mr. Layton, I think it was, and his the enforcement officers that came round to his door to try and grab some money off him, and he took them to the High Court. Anyway, let's have a look at this. Unenforceable council tax liability orders. We keep being told that there's no contract, that it's a liability order. So here we go. The first thing you get if you have not paid your council tax and you have this hearing is as follows. So councils and local authority produce a notice. They do not produce the liability order. And we did notice that, and I showed you the judiciary rules that they had, that in such a hearing, it is pronounced by the judge. It's pronounced, spoken, oratorily, using the mouth. It's not written down anywhere, which is why there is no liability order in paperwork. But then they go back to the council and say, well, here we are, to your list of names, I have now pronounced it. And so the council then produce what they call a liability order. Shall we have a look at one? Here it is. Here's one, liability order in respect of council. And you can see there, it's not actually addressed to anybody specifically. It only has a date on it. It has the name of a court. And it's signed by the Justice of the Peace there, you can see in the bottom, and the squiggle of a signature. And if you can identify that, you're a better man than I am, Gunga Din. But anyway, that is what you get. Sometimes you get variations with a little crest on it, which isn't from the court at all. It looks like it's from the court, but this is from the council, not from a court. And they call it a public liability order, but it's actually just a notice. That's all it is. So let's go and have a look at our information here. So our second point, the council notice then and supporting spreadsheets produced by the council does not carry the authority of the court. A notice is not a court document. So again, this is not a court document. The council notice should not be signed by the Justice of the Peace or a magistrate, which we looked at the rules, if you remember, in my previous video about all of this, and it said he shouldn't actually sign anything. But lo and behold, there at the bottom on this particular one and many others, he has signed. So what does that mean? Well, we'll come to that in a second. Anyone using the notice and who claims the notice to be a liability order from the court is acting illegally and unlawfully. And that might be your enforcement officer who's banged on the door and waving his liability order, basically waving this or something similar. It's not a court document, so he's acting illegally and unlawfully. So says my correspondent. Solicitors who submit these notifications into court claiming them to be liability orders and true copies of the court record are also acting illegally and unlawfully. Because, number 8, the court will have no record of any individual listed in the bulk hearing. So just to explain that, because there are thousands of people who fall behind or do not pay for whatever reason it is, they rent a room or they have a room to the side and a magistrate or whatever is in there, Justice of the Peace, and they have this list of names. And so the Justice of the Peace says, oh, well, okay, I'm going to pronounce that there is a liability order for all of them to pay. There's no paperwork. And so there you go. There is nothing from the actual court to say. So if you're on that list, you've got nothing from the court. So the court will have no individual list in the bulk hearing. As the court has no record of these individuals listed in the council tax hearing, the court will not be able to provide a copy of the court register. If the court cannot provide the individual with a copy of the court register, the court will not be able to provide the liability order against the individual. The court will not be able to provide a copy of any sum that was awarded to the council against the individual. So they can't tell you how much it was because there's no record. The council may produce a spreadsheet. This is the council may produce a spreadsheet claiming that it's a true copy of the amount awarded to the council. But this claim is false because how do you know it's true? They can claim whatever they like. Any document claiming to be a true copy of the court record must comply with Rule 68 of the Magistrates' Court Rules and be stamped by an officer of the court. That's not stamped by anyone and as a squiggle of a signature purporting to be a Justice of the Peace. So, number 14, if the council do not hold a liability order and the courts have no record of sums awarded against individuals in bulk hearings and cannot provide the liability order awarded against the individuals, then there is no liability order. And finally, if neither the council or the courts can produce the court-stamped and certified copy of the amount awarded against the individual and the council only hold a notice, then council tax is unenforceable. There you go. And it seems to me to make perfect logic sense. And just go through it again if you didn't get it. Now, I was looking at this thinking, oh, blimey, should I make another video on this? Can the audience tolerate it? But I think that's an important series of logical steps, and I'm indebted to Paul, who sent that in to me. But I made a few notes on this because a few things occurred to me that might be relevant, and I've got them on scrappy bits of paper here, so let me go through them. First of all, of course, there's the old maxim. Let's just say this: ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's something they use on us all the time, isn't it? Oh yes, ignorance of the law, no excuse. Well, we can throw that back at them, seeing as they are the courts. They should know this sort of stuff. They're paid to know this. So let's just keep that on one side, that ignorance of the law is no excuse. So, taking up some of those points, here are some of the observations I've got for you. Every magistrate, then, who has signed the claimant's notice. Now notice I say the claimant's notice and not the counsel, because in this instance the counsel is the claimant, isn't it, going to a court. The court is a separate entity, or it should be. So the counsel is going to them. They are the claimant. So any magistrate who signed the claimant's notice since 2003, when the law changed, is obviously then personally liable in a private capacity. And if the notice is being used to extort payment or goods, then is this a crime? Because there is a victim and there is a perpetrator, and he's somebody who's taken personal liability by signing it, which would be the magistrate or the justice of the peace, as you saw in that bit of paper there. Not that bit of paper, that bit of paper. There we go. They're the ones, because they're acting in an outside of the office. They've been told by the rules they shouldn't be signing it. So, is this the colour of office? The office, in other words, is being used to extort money because they are endorsing the notice as if it is a liability order, claiming it is something which it is not. The colour of office, I believe that is called. So, the magistrate then, anything that they sign is outside of their judicial function, as I said, because in the rules it says they mustn't sign them. So in that case, they're signing them in a private capacity. They can, and also, this was the other thing, they cannot sign the claimant's paper, because that means that it's like a kangaroo court. They're all claiming together. It shows a bias. It shows that they're ganging up on the defendant. Now, the judge in the case of Mr. Leighton and the enforcement officers apparently said, and I may have got this wrong, that that he signed the liability order, but of course he didn't. It was the claimants. That was the judge not the judge, the high court judge, but the judge who signed the paperwork for the enforcement officers who approached Mr. Leighton, as I believe it. If I've got that wrong, I apologise. Two more little thoughts then. So, if perhaps watching this just out of curiosity, you happen to be a justice of the peace or a magistrate or a clerk of the court or one of these people, you may be watching this. So here's a question then. If you are a magistrate or a justice of the peace or one of these officials in the court, and you signed one of these documents, like here, you signed that, who instructed you to sign it? I mean, what made you sign it? Did you think, oh, well, I ought to sign it because, it's important? Did you know that you were signing a notice and not a liability order, because it isn't a liability order? And did you know, did you know, I can't remember writing it, did you know that you were signing outside of your judiciary function and were therefore publicly liable, personally liable, which could put you in a bit of hock if you signed loads of them and people keep coming back to you and saying, actually, I've been bankrupt, or I've had my van or car or whatever it is stolen, or I've been extorted money on the basis of this thing. So in other words, final thought, if an enforcement officer has come to your door, taken your car, extorted money at the door, or even bankrupted you via solicitors, and we now know that it was affected by nothing more than a notice, signed by a magistrate outside of their judiciary function, who is liable? And as an afterthought, I thought I wrote it down on the back of one of these. Is your insurance up to speed, and will it cover you? Just a thought. And finally, on a similar thing, a friend of mine showed me their summons, so-called summons, which really came from the council, because the court summons said, here is the date, we summons you to the magistrates' court, and it said, before you turn up, just check with the council that you have an appointment on that said day. And I thought to myself, hang on a minute, if this is a summons from the court, why are you checking with the claimant that you have an appointment? Surely the summons is in and of itself the appointment. I mean, that to me, if you took it to a bigger extreme, is like in a murder case, you get a summons and it says, oh, before you go to defend yourself, check with the murderer or whomever that you can turn up at court. I mean, it's a nonsense, is it? The whole thing is obviously falling apart. Be interested in your comments. Thank you for watching.